very appropriate way and strive for parental engagement wherever possible. For too long, it has been unavailable to adolescents across Northern Ireland. In May 2019, Sir John Giles's independent review into how the criminal justice system in Northern Ireland deals with serious sexual offences cases made a series of recommendations. They recommended the need to include in the school curriculum for RSE on matters such as consent, personal space, boundaries and appropriate behaviour, relationships and sexuality. In April this year, an evaluation by Northern Ireland's Education and Training Inspectorate found that 44% of schools reported that they were delivering the topic of consent to a small extent or not at all. Earlier this month, the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission published the report into its investigation into relationships and sex education in post-primary schools. It found that the curriculum on relationships and sexuality education does not meet human rights standards. According to the NIHRC, most schools are not providing age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on access to abortion services. The investigation found, and I quote, "Some schools actively contributed to the shame and stigma surrounding unplanned pregnancy and abortion by making statements such as, abortion is not a means of contraception and those who knowingly engage in casual sex must bear the consequences of their actions." It also revealed that some schools are teaching children that homosexuality is wrong. In England, Scotland and Wales, compulsory RSE that embeds reproductive rights and choices within their curricula, implementing the CEDAW recommendations, is already in place. In the Labour Party, we welcome the fact that today's regulations will help ensure the curriculum for children in Northern Ireland meets this standard too. The Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission has welcomed the new regulations that we are discussing here today. The Commission has emphasised that their implementation and monitoring will be critical. Schools need to support and to develop their capacity to deliver RSE, and the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and other expert independent organisations have offered their expertise to do this. I urge the Minister to continue to engage with the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission going forward and to ensure that these changes are implemented and monitored effectively so that children in Northern Ireland can enjoy the same rights, education and choices as those for the rest of the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I first of all thank you for calling me, and I had spoken to you beforehand and spoken to others as well, and I wish to put on record very clearly my concerns, opposition even, in relation to what we have before us. As I said to the Shadow Minister before we started as well, and the Secretary of State will not be surprised when he hears this. It is heartwarming to see the level of interest of the mainland MPs on this issue for Northern Ireland education. And yet when I raised this issue of funding for preschool education, I didn't receive the same interest in the Chamber. So it's really good to see members taking the time to come along and have an interest in education, when quite clearly in the past it's been one of the things that they weren't really interested in. I expect I'll see the present members at other Northern Ireland debates and look forward to their renewed support when it comes to fixing the framework and getting back to the United Kingdom at all times, not just when expedient to push an agenda. Madam Chair, I rise to highlight multiple concerns with this RSE regulation and the speed of such regulations and the disregard that there are for people in Northern Ireland, those that I represent, those who have come to me, the church groups, the education authorities, the headmasters and the teachers. The Secretary of State is aware of the concerns of the DUP and by individual constituents who have raised issues from the Northern Ireland office, of which there are numerous from across this whole part of Northern Ireland, and indeed I've had various letters from numerous people outlining these issues very, very clearly. Multiple questions, Madam Chair. I'm sure we'll try and get it done if we can before the votes at 7 o'clock, but if not, it's very important that we have on record our concerns for these things. The first is to grasp an understanding of the reason that the Minister is seeking to railroad this issue through with no consultation and inappropriate information. I've read the standard response to enable schools to factor in a programme for the new deadline, a deadline which the Minister imposed on himself, and yet when schools have asked how they're supposed to operate and run a school on the slash budget and afford staff, pay rises and the increase of utilities. The City State does not seem in such a rush to enable them to know how they will run their statutorily obliged learning schemes with a severely underfunded budget. Interest in some things, no interest in other things, the really important core issues. If the Minister would give a frank and open answer as to the real purpose behind this steamrolling, it would be certainly useful for moving forward. Schools have expressed concern to me, and I know to my other colleagues who will speak as well as members of this committee and those who are witnesses. The schools have expressed concern to me of the fact that they are statutorily obliged to have an RSE policy, which is subject to consultation with parents. This cannot possibly take place, and so we're left yet again with a scenario in which the parents in Northern Ireland, my constituents in Strangford and across the whole of Northern Ireland, are not given the same consultation facility as those in the Minister's own constituency, indeed, and right on the member for Daventry. The question is clear: why are parents in Strangford unable to consult with how their children are taught sensitive issues? Nothing they shouldn't be taught. These are sensitive issues, and the parents want an input in that process, the teachers want an input in that process, and the churches want an input into that process. And yet the constituents of the right honourable members of Daventry were allowed to sow into their children's education. Yet again, the Secretary of State has enforced on a majority his will over their rights. That's how I see it, that's how my constituents see it, and that's how other constituents from other parts of Northern Ireland see it again. One would wonder how constituents in other areas would feel to see this done on an issue which so many care so desperately about: their children and protection of their innocence and their childhood. As a grandfather of 6 grandchildren, 2 of them at school, some at nursery school and some about to attend, I'm very aware from a personal point of view exactly what it means, but I'm also very aware, Madam Chair, the impact upon all those children across Northern Ireland. When we come to the ability of parents to withdraw their child from such lessons, the wording is so vague, it would be laughable were it not for the education of my granddaughters I referred to, and other children as well. The Department must formulate their own withdrawal policy, but this does not need to be in place at the time of the new regulation being enforced. Again, it doesn't give the protection which the Secretary of State referred to, and we would dispute. However, a clear lesson on the nanny state's policy in raising children and the value placed in the autonomous nature of a family unit, the government has shown its hand today. Gone is the right of the parent, and in its place is government's job to educate morally as well as academically, ignoring parents, ignoring teachers, ignoring schools, and ignoring the input of the churches as well. That's what these regulations do, and the question is, where will it end, and why has it been rolled out and enforced so quickly? There is a reason that the standard 21-day convention between laying an instrument and bringing it into effect was not followed. This is certainly a question which this House must ask at large, regardless of opinion or lack of opinion sometimes on this subject. Why has the protocol of this House been set aside in this case, and what has made it so urgent? I have outlined that schools cannot implement this change without consultation, so what can be the point? The Minister imposed a deadline, the Minister can change the deadline. To me it's very, very simple, Madam Chair, and certainly when he comes back to us at the end, it'll be very, very interesting to see what his reply will be to my comments and the comments of my right honourable friend, the member for East Antrim and the member for North Antrim as well. The cynic in me, and it's not just age, Madam Chair, as we get older and sometimes we do become cynical, but I think you become cynical sometimes with life. Many of my constituents are equally cynical. They've contacted me in droves, and I mean that, be under no illusion about the depth of opposition that there is to this, from right across my constituency, from all religious persuasions, from all political parties. Would say, and my constituents tell me in Strangford, that this is just another tool to beat the DUP into submission. The slashing of the budget was not enough to pressurise us into sacrificing the integrity of Northern Ireland and our future, and perhaps the imposition of yet another socially grey area may force them into this. I hope that this is not the case, but nothing I've heard so far from the Secretary of State has convinced me and certainly not my constituents, who I would say respectively, Madam Chair, have lost all faith in a Secretary of State who seems so removed from the needs of the area under his responsibility and more focused on politically forcing movement. In other words, political machinations at work. The fact is, in this and for this House to consider, is why the imposition of the abortion regime, the most relaxed in all of Europe, which is in turn seeing a press for the relaxation of the abortion on demand until birth throughout the United Kingdom, right here. Always said it was going that way, and that realisation is coming forward with a zest, with a scant debate which allowed zero debate on the part of the regime. Government has been allowed to pass legislation of importance with unacceptable scrutiny, and those who press for it now will have to accept it when the shoe is on the other foot. I think back, Madam Chair, to the outcry when government made the decision to, rightly in my opinion, overturn Scottish Parliament decisions recently on gender recognition. My colleagues were up in arms about the circumnavigation of devolution, and yet had not been silent and complicit when this was carried out by the Secretary of State on the matter of Northern Ireland a number of months previously. Double standards, forked tongues, two opinions about the same thing. The silence of this House on holding the government accountable to process set a precedent, and yet again on this issue will ultimately affect how this government views and treats devolution. Make no. I'm happy to give way to the old friend.
I'm following what he's saying with great interest, and I understand his anger. But I know he won't agree with me. But it follows logically then that if the honourable gentleman and his colleagues want to have a greater say in what is going on in Northern Ireland, because he's criticising the Secretary of State for taking this action, surely the answer is simple: return to Stormont.
It's even more simple. It's get the protocol right, get the Stormont deal right, and make it acceptable to unionists. For far too long, Madam Chair, what has happened is that the Conservative Party have pursued a policy which, and now you put the subject up, have pursued a policy which ignores the viewpoints of unionists. And I know the honourable gentleman is a unionist and he understands our point of view. It certainly would be my opinion in this House that he does. But I really can't understand why we haven't got a process that we're part of, and the Stormont break doesn't deliver that. It doesn't deliver the legislation and legal importance that we want to see in place. So where does it lie? It lies with the Secretary of State. It lies with government here. And let's be quite clear. The first thing that we wish to see, Madam Chair, is to see an assembly that is back to normal and is working, and that would be our wish to see that happen. Most members do not get involved in the Northern Ireland question, although the honourable gentleman quite clearly has. Is being used as a baseboard for UK legislation there, and the processes you turn a blind eye to for Northern Ireland can and will be used by successive governments as a precedent. I say that again because it's important that I say it, because I feel it sets the precedent. Precedent has been set before, it's set once again. Madam Chair, my constituents remain unimpressed, and I say this seriously, in a Secretary of State who, as one constituent said to me, seeks to sow discord and crash our society in Northern Ireland. Now, some of the backbenchers, right honourable members, may not wish to hear this, but it's going to be said, and it'll be said in this committee today. Whether you like to hear it or whether you don't, and that's the point we're going to make here. So I hope that you'll take some listening to our comments for once when we have this delegated legislative committee to